Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And this is our NFL Week 4 predictions and pick 'em. Of course, picking up where we left off, where we go through every single game for the upcoming week of the NFL schedule and provide our picks for who's going to win or lose those matchups. It's a lot of fun. And we track how we've been doing throughout the year. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe for more. And Austin, let's go ahead and move into where we see our records. And at this point, as per usual, of course, no surprises here for anyone who's been watching the channel. I find myself trailing Austin up to this point. It's been a pretty bizarre and crazy first 3 weeks of the season, which finds our records not necessarily where we'd like them to be. Austin at 28-19-1. I myself am at 26-21-1. I'm happy to be within even a couple games of Austin. We've been picking a lot of different crazy ways this year. And then who would have expected, an Indianapolis Colts beat the Kansas City Chiefs in walk-off fashion essentially today. Craziness around the NFL, but we're holding in there. We're above 500, and hopefully this week's going to help propel us even further. So let's jump into the first game here, Austin. And it's a good one on Thursday night. We have the Miami Dolphins, who pulled off a miraculous win against the Buffalo Bills, 3-0 record for them, going up against the 1-2 Cincinnati Bengals, who just had a get-right game against my New York Jets. And we're split here again. It feels like we've been split every single week on a multitude of games. You're going with the Dolphins, who have been really the hot hand since getting Tyreek Hill. I'm going with the AFC Super Bowl appearance team in the Cincinnati Bengals from last year. Walk us through your decision to go with Miami here.
I definitely have a general bias for, picking for the Bengals. However, I kind of look at it, what Miami's done, their body of work, and it's more a matchup problem for me. I look at the Miami wide receivers matching up against the Cincinnati Bengal corners, and that's where I struggle here. I just don't think that secondary is ready to, at least slow down the Dolphins. I think, offensively, the Bengals match up pretty well against a lot of different teams with the multitude of ways that they can hurt you on the ground with Mixon, through the air with Jamar Chase or T. Higgins for that matter. And I think that, more so, I'm just concerned about the Bengals defense more than anything. I think even Miami's going to get some pressure on Joe Burrow like every other team has this season. So overall, that's kind of what led into my decision. Miami's a little more explosive offensively. That's exactly what people are saying about the Bengals last year, but I think Miami is definitely a tough match here for the Bengals.
Those are all really good reasons. And one of my best picks in week 3 was actually picking the Dolphins over the Bills. So you would think, hey, I'm going to ride with Miami here. Part of why I picked Miami last week against Buffalo was because teams just don't go undefeated. Buffalo, despite being probably the better team on paper, I just felt like, hey, this is maybe one of those games that, going on the road against a division rival, that could be a tough game for them. And Miami, same case here. They're going on the road to a tough environment in Cincinnati against a really talented team. Yes, they haven't lived up to expectations up to this point, but they got some rhythm now in week 3 against the Jets. And I think that we could see the Bengals really roll into this game and really hunt out their best players. Jamar Chase didn't really pop off this past week, but I think, if he goes back to kind of what we expect from him, 80 plus yards, a touchdown, probably could see a big week from him. T. Higgins as well. Overall, I like what Cincinnati has on the field. I think this is going to be a shootout type of game and one that, if Miami lingers around, I could see them pulling it out. But I like Cincinnati here simply because they are at home, which now brings us into our Sunday slate. And again, there's a really good collection of games. I'm really excited about the schedule this year. And the Minnesota Vikings, who had a tremendous win. Austin, you and I were actually at that game in person against the Detroit Lions. Kirk Cousins walks off the Detroit Lions, essentially played really well in the fourth quarter of that game. And Captain Kirk got the job done for Minnesota. Now he goes into New Orleans, a place that he's been there before, and he's done it there before in a playoff setting, even beating Drew Brees a few years back, where he hit Kyle Rudolph in the back of the end zone. No Drew Brees this time, no Kyle Rudolph this time, but this is a really good matchup between two teams that really have had a lot of bad blood for each other over the last 10 to 15 years. You go back all the way to Bountygate even for some of that. Austin, you went with the Saints here at home in Louisiana, and I went with the Minnesota Vikings here. Break down your thoughts and I'll get into mine.
Yeah, so looking at this game's actually in London. So this is going to be that early game on the Sunday slate. So, neutral site. And I think that, the Minnesota Vikings are going to have a pretty good crowd despite New Orleans being that home team. That's why I'm opting, I still am going with the Saints here. I think when you kind of look at the matchups here, Dalvin Cook's likely going to be out next week. I kind of look at how Kirk Cousins against pressure definitely struggles. Detroit wasn't able to generate a ton on him, this past week here. But I think that Kirk Cousins is going to struggle because New Orleans is, a top 3 defensive unit this year overall. I know they had their struggles against Carolina, but I believe holistically they have some great players in that secondary. Their defensive line's very tough and a really good linebacking core. So with the culmination of that, I think they're going to throw a variety of different looks Kirk Cousins' way. I'm all in on this Vikings team. I just feel like this is one of those games that they're going to drop that they should win.
That's understandable. For me, the reason I'm going with Minnesota, Justin Jefferson has to wake up. Phenomenal in week 1. Obviously got a ton of praise. Even some players in the NFL and a lot of media calling him the best player in the league after his incredible week 1. Well, weeks 2 and 3, he might as well not have been on the roster because he barely made an impact in those games. Darius Slay in week 2 really shut him down. And Austin, Jeff Okudah really outplayed Justin Jefferson in week 3 for the Lions. But going in here against Marshawn Lattimore, again, not a great matchup. That's a very tough corner to go out and beat. But I think Jefferson can do it. And if they get any level of production similar to what they got in week 1, and no, I'm not expecting 180 yards, but let's say he gets 100 yards. Well, that puts the Vikings in a really good spot to move the football. I think Kevin O'Connell's going to do a great job trying to scheme him open a little bit more. And we saw a little bit of that in the second half where they went to Adam Thielen quite a bit across the middle of the field. I think that there's going to be some rub routes and some certain ways to find space for Justin Jefferson just to simply get him the football. And once they do that, I think they're going to be really tough to beat, especially at that neutral site in London, like you said. So I like Minnesota here. Again, this is a really good matchup, though. And now as we move into our next matchup in this game or in this week, it's the Seattle Seahawks at the Detroit Lions. And this Lions team is really impressive. With Jared Goff under center, they can move the football. They play with good tempo. They're able to run the rock. They've got a really good offensive line. And I think that they're just the easy pick here against Seattle, especially at home with such a potent offense. So far on the road this year, they're 0-2. They are 1-0 at home. And they played really tough against the Vikings in Minnesota this week as well. Austin, you have the Lions here as well. What other key matchups are you watching for?
Yeah, I think once again, you look at Jeff Okudah. He has, definitely been a bright spot for this team. The first 3 weeks of the season, a lot of high praises for me to him. I think he's done a great job so far. Aiden Hutchinson is going to be a matchup nightmare for Seattle. Good luck trying to block him. Detroit progressively is getting better on defense. And I think offensively, Ben Johnson's put together a great game plan week in, week out to get some good quality throws out of Jared Goff. Play to his strengths. A lot of that play action is truly set up by the intense run game that the Detroit Lions have had to offer with DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams being a very nice pairing. They feed off of each other well. They complement each other well. And I think that's why Jared Goff has looked, as, very, very good comparatively throughout his entire career. I think this matches up pretty well versus some of the other years in his career that he's had. So overall, that's why I'm kind of excited about Detroit in this game.
Yeah, the Lions are a good team. There's a good argument to be made that, hey, maybe they're the best team with a losing record after week 3. They're very, very tough and competitive, and I would be shocked if they don't get the win here against Seattle. Moving into our next matchup, we now have the New York Jets, who I'm a fan of, unfortunately, going into Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers at what was once named Heinz Field, no longer named that. Austin, we both went with the Steelers here. I don't think we need to really dive into it too deep from my perspective. I really want to know from you, though, why are the Steelers just the easy, obvious answer here?
I think when you look at Pittsburgh, they're going to find a rhythm in the run game, and this very well could be the game. Najee Harris needs to get into a certain rhythm of the game. I'm curious to know what's going to happen at the quarterback spot. Mitch Trubisky very well, probably will be the starter. I think Deontay Johnson's a tough cover all afternoon long. Chase Claypool's a good player. George Pickens should see, a little more increased role. I think as he continues to pick up the playbook, they're going to work him in more and more. You're going to see that snap percentage go up. And I think when he's in the game, he's definitely a big factor. Pat Freiermuth is another big time player, true red zone threat. Overall, I think the New York Jets, I thought about picking them in this game, but at the end of the day, I think Pittsburgh at home is a very tough environment to play. Over the last 20 years, that's definitely been the case for sure. It's tough for any team to go in there, regardless of kind of the talent Pittsburgh has. I think Mike Tomlin is one of those guys. When you look at his historic record, he's going to be above 500, and this kind of plays into that hand.
Yeah, through 12 quarters this year as well, the Jets have been worse than their opponent in basically 11 of them. And you could even include 13 extra minutes into that for the one quarter. They were better than the Browns, I would say. The Jets just aren't that good quite yet. Now, I love what Joe Douglas has done with this team. There's a lot more talent there. But quite frankly, they're just not as good as a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a ton of defensive players who can make plays. And just quite frankly, Deontay Johnson and offensively with Najee Harris, they're really, really talented. So now as we move into our next game here, we look at a team here between the Chicago Bears and the New York Giants. And Austin, probably not the game of the week here. Of course, the Giants do have a Monday night matchup, and they're coming off of a little bit of a shorter week than Chicago. Chicago got a win over the Houston Texans in what was a pretty competitive game. We both went with the Giants here. I think the fact that this game is in East Rutherford, New Jersey definitely helps the Giants quite a bit here, especially for a team where they're playing a young Bears squad where, they have a little bit less experience and a younger QB in Justin Fields. Do you think that those things play a factor into that as well?
I think Brian Dable has done a really good job, even with the lesser roster, has picked up some big key wins for his Giants. And I think this is where teams are, pretty evenly matched talent-wise. I think the Giants have an edge on them, but I definitely think while they're at home, Brian Dable is going to keep things rolling here. And we'll kind of have to see how Monday night plays out for the Giants and obviously the Cowboys. But I kind of look at the Giants as a team that, is going to get the job done. Brian Dable does a great job. Saquon Barkley looks completely revitalized. He's trying to get the most out of Daniel Jones. This is a team that's been super impressive with the current roster that they have. I think they get the job done. The Bears, definitely have a ways to go, but there are some promising signs with this team.
Right. Both good young teams. We'll see if they can continue to take steps forward. I think the Giants have shown a little bit more up to this point this year, though. Moving into our next game here, and it's an in-division game in the AFC South. And this is a really important game already early in the season, just with how that division is looking to shape up. The Tennessee Titans head into Indianapolis in what is one of the probably toughest games to call all week, because you just don't know what you're getting from these teams. The Titans go out some weeks and look great, and then some weeks they get destroyed by 40 points on a primetime game. And for the Colts, again, you don't really know what you're going to get. They beat Kansas City, but they've tied with Houston, got shut out by Jacksonville. You don't really know what you're getting week in, week out from these two squads. Austin, you went with Tennessee. I know you like their matchups against Indianapolis, so I'll have you talk about that, and then I'll get into my Colts pick.
Yeah, I kind of like the Titans here. I think Derrick Henry is going to have to carry the team on his back like he's done his entire career. And once again, divisional matchup. Indianapolis is a place that, I think Tennessee can go ahead and win a road game in. Mike Vrabel's done a terrific job as his tenure as the head coach. I think he's going to have to try to get it back on track. Indianapolis isn't as explosive as we thought they maybe could be with Matt Ryan, as much as a Matt Ryan-led offense could be. But I think at this state, they're a little vulnerable. I kind of like, the front for Tennessee against Jonathan Taylor. I think, it's very possible they're able to try to bottle up the run just a little bit. So that's more or less why I went with Tennessee here. It was not an easy pick. This was not an easy game to pick. Divisional matchup, teams that are actually underperforming where they thought they would be to this point. The Titans definitely want to continue to play better football. And I think this is a great week to really, kind of correct it and right the wrongs here per se.
Again, a lot of good points for me. I think the question here is, how do the Titans get after Matt Ryan? If you give Matt Ryan time to sit in the pocket and you have Michael Pittman out wide, you're going to be able to work off of play action with Jonathan Taylor. I think that there's work that can be done for Indianapolis. I think this is going to be a close game. I prefer Indy slightly. This is one of those where I was going back and forth a little bit. Again, I give them a slight nod for being at home as well. That plays into it here. And we see this a lot with divisional games where, home field advantage really does go a long way in determining who's going to win or lose these outcomes. Again, I think it's a close matchup, but I think if Matt Ryan is given time in the pocket, which is what I'm expecting, I think he's going to be able to deliver on time, on target to his outside receivers, specifically Michael Pittman downfield. And I think that's going to be advantageous for Indy in this matchup. Going into our next matchup here, we have the Los Angeles Chargers, who look actually rather feeble in their 38-10 loss against the Jacksonville Jaguars, going into Houston to take on the Texans, who I think one word to describe that team this year has been competitive. They've played in a bunch of close games up to this point. They haven't been as successful as I think a lot of Texans fans would like to see at this point, but it's not like this team's a rollover squad. We both went with the Chargers here, though, and I think part of the reasoning, for me at least, is this is what you call a bounce back game where, hey, we got really destroyed in the second half. And if you're in that Chargers locker room, that's how you got to be talking. And you got to say, hey, we're going to go out next week and we're going to really show everyone that we're serious we're legit. The Chargers are another team that below 500 right now. They have a real case to be made that, hey, we're the best team under 500 right now, and we should be an above 500 team. Barely lost to the Chiefs, just did not show up in the second half against Jacksonville. They'll show up in this game. They'll beat the Texans. Austin, are you along the same thought process there?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a bounce back game. I think the Chargers are, one of the better teams in the AFC. And I just see that, Justin Herbert's going to heal up a little bit more, obviously dealing with the rib issue right now. But I mean, he was able to make some incredible throws against Jacksonville that were just insane. So I think once he's a little bit healthier, obviously the Chargers had a ton of injuries. Keenan Allen being out definitely didn't help. Joey Bosa going down early in the game definitely changed the outcome of it. However, I still think that Jacksonville would have won that game regardless of those injuries. But looking at the Chargers here, big bounce back week. I don't expect them to lose to Houston.
Yeah, definitely not. Moving into our next game now, we see a matchup here between the Cleveland Browns and the Atlanta Falcons. And Cleveland heads into Atlanta, and the Falcons, another one of those teams that they're competitive, even if their roster is not quite on par. This is a game that both you and I struggled to pick here. We both like the fact that Atlanta's at home. We also like Kyle Pitts' involvement this past week against Seattle a little bit more from what we had seen in weeks 1 and 2. But we still opted for the Browns, and I think it's really based on the roster here, Austin. Talk about how talented the Browns roster is outside of the QB position right now as they wait for Deshaun Watson to reacclimate himself after his suspension from week 11.
I think they did a great job with the idea of trusting Jacoby Brissett being their starting quarterback. Why? It's because he plays complementary football. He's a guy that does not turn over the football. He makes sure that he has the game under control. And the reason they can do that is because they have an outstanding pairing out running back. Not only do you have to deal with Nick Chubb, you also have Kareem Hunt, who's super talented as well. David Njoku, who has really come on, especially in that week 3. I think there's a lot to like about the Browns, offensively and defensively. Definitely feel that they can make some improvements here, but this is a talented roster. I think the Atlanta Falcons they're fun. I think their offense is really, really entertaining to watch, actually, with Drake London and Kyle Pitts. That's why it was a tough matchup. Atlanta's going to have a loud crowd there, during this game, but I think Cleveland can get the job done on the road. They're going to have to run the football a ton, which Atlanta is definitely going to have their hands full.
Right. I think this is going to be a close competitive matchup. We both went with Cleveland, but I don't think either of us would be shocked if Atlanta does pull this one out in the ATL. Moving into our next matchup here now, we have the Washington Commanders going into Dallas to take on the Dallas Cowboys. And despite the fact that Dallas has a Monday night matchup, they're going to have one less day to prepare for this game. Theoretically, we still both went with the Cowboys. And I think the fact that the Commanders just did not show up against Philadelphia probably really leans itself into this, right? They gave up at least 9 sacks against Philadelphia. And now you're going up against a matchup that you are going to see Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. It's not like it gets easier all of a sudden. In fact, it might get tougher. The Cowboys defensive front is going to be a real challenge here for Washington. Of course, they lost Brandon Scherff this offseason to the Jaguars. That looks like a big loss and a really big gain for Jacksonville as well. And I think the Cowboys should be the favorite here. Not only are they playing at Jerry's Palace, I think they're just the better team. Austin, what else do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think Washington kind of adds kind of a interesting element here. Their receiving core is really good. Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, a lot of good playmakers there. But like you had just previously mentioned, the 9 sacks against Philadelphia. What do we think is going to happen with Micah Parsons lining up at different spots, just barreling down on your offensive line, and more specifically Carson Wentz? I think it's going to cause some turnovers. I really do believe that. It's a turnover-driven game, and Carson Wentz, if he's turning the ball over, they're not going to win ball games. It's just the fact of the matter. That's why we both like the Cowboys. I think it's a totally logical pick, despite Dak Prescott not playing in this game. To me, I don't think people should overthink this one.
Right. I don't think Washington's been all that impressive this year. Even if you go back to week 1, yes, they got the win, but I don't think that they really had that game in control at any point either. So for me, Washington, I'm just a little bit lower on, and it seems like you're kind of in agreement with me there as well. Moving into our next matchup now, we're looking at a really good one. Jacksonville Jaguars, number 1 in the AFC South. You guys know I've been riding with these Jaguars. They are Austin's favorite team, and I'm not shying away. We're going Jaguars here against Philadelphia. And yes, I have been quoted as saying, I think Philadelphia is the best team in the NFC. I don't care. It doesn't mean they're going undefeated. And I think Jacksonville's a really good spoiler team yet again. I think that they get it done. And for everyone saying, oh, Philly's at home, they have a 54% career win percentage at home. in the entire duration of their franchise. It's actually 54.3%. I expect that to move down to 54.2% because Jacksonville is going to get the job done. And another reason for that, Christian Kirk, or AKA Chain Mover, he's going to get the job done this week. I know Darius Slay stopped Justin Jefferson. He's not going to do it this week against Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk's built different. And if you don't believe me, how do these numbers sound through 3 games? 18 catches, 267 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's already half of his career high for touchdowns. He's on pace for nearly 100 catches as well. And he's also on pace for about 13 to 1,400 yards. Sounds like all pro numbers to me. Everyone freaked out about the contract. Well, one guy who's not freaking out about that contract is Trevor Lawrence, because he has found a really good chemistry with the new number 1 wide receiver in Jacksonville. And it's allowed the other receivers there to really bud as well. Marvin Jones kind of playing more in his natural role as a number 2 type 3 guy, where he's, a red zone threat, chain mover as well in short yardage situation. He's been really reliable for them. And I just think with ETN, James Robinson, yes, Philly's got a really stout defensive front, a really solid front 7. These are guys who do not go down easy. James Robinson, very patient, finds his holes. And Travis Etienne, it takes a whole team to tackle him despite his slight frame. Those 2 guys are a lot of fun to watch in the backfield. Don't forget about Jacksonville this year. I think they're going to win the AFC South. I really feel confident about that after the first 3 weeks of football. And I'm going to ride with them here. I got the Jacksonville Jaguars being an upset here over Philadelphia. Austin, who do you got here? Or why do you have the Eagles here over your Jags?
I don't know why you made an incorrect pick here intentionally, because you can tell everybody that's watching now how passionate he was about Jacksonville. Let's remember that they have 4 wins in the last 2 years. So let's
2 this year, Duval County. Let's ride.
He's riding with that in the AFC South. Good for him, man. He's on a boat by himself. There's not anybody else saying that right now. A lot of people are high on it. I think Philadelphia is just going to destroy the Jags offensive line. They're going to throw, once again, a lot of looks. Trevor Lawrence is going to get pressured. He's going to throw a couple picks. I think that he's done a great job with ball control so far this season. But at the end of the day, I really think there's going to be some mistakes made. In that week 1 matchup against the Commanders, who have a pretty stout defensive line, he made some big mistakes, and that was clear and obvious. I think the same thing happens here. I don't think Jacksonville is going to have any answer for Jalen Hurts or AJ Brown or Devontae Smith. Watch out. I really think this is going to be a crashing down to earth kind of thing for Jacksonville.
I want to point out one more thing here as well. If Jacksonville is going to win this game, you're going to see some great play from Devin Lloyd and Foye Oluokun. They spent a lot in the offseason on their linebacker unit there between those 2 guys. They spent a lot for Foye in free agency, and they drafted Devin Lloyd in the first round. They use their assets well to go get those guys. And those guys are the players that you need to have step up against the Jalen Hurts matchup here to limit his rushing potential, to limit throws across the middle. And I think the cornerback play is going to be a big positive. We saw some pretty good coverage in week 3 against the Chargers. I think that the Jaguars are going to step up and continue to ride here against Philadelphia. Moving into our next matchup now, as we go into Baltimore, the Buffalo Bills will be heading there as well. And obviously the Bills offensive coordinator was not happy after that loss this past week to Miami as they ran out of time. But I think this is a get right game for them as well. The Ravens are a really good team. The Bills are just the better team. And yes, this game happens in Baltimore, but for me, the Bills, they're not going to drop 2 games in a row this year. And I think going into Baltimore, it's a tough place to play, but they've got the team and the squad to do it. I think Josh Allen has a monster performance here. Austin, break down this matchup a little bit more as well.
Yeah, I definitely think that Josh Allen's got to get right, but I think Baltimore's a tough challenge. I'm going to be honest. I mean, stopping Lamar Jackson, Buffalo has a really good defense under Leslie Frazier, but Lamar Jackson is just so tough on the ground, considering he just had 100 yards in week 3. I think that even Baltimore is going to struggle. They're going to contain him better, but I have my questions here about Baltimore being able to hang with the Bills offensively.
That's definitely a fair point here. And then as we move into our next game, we are looking at the Arizona Cardinals heading into Carolina. This year, I've been really gun shy about Arizona, but I've been more gun shy about Carolina. Just not in love with this team. We saw Laviska Shenault make a couple big plays today. He had 2 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown, including 1 long one. That was a really great game from him. But again, I'm not expecting that going into this matchup. The Cardinals are a better team. I think they get the job done here, even on the road. Austin, if the Panthers were to win, what would you watch for them? And why did you ultimately choose the Cardinals?
I think CMC is the guy to watch, and that's pretty much true for every time that they play. He's the engine of that offense. Baker Mayfield just has to, play mistake-free football, and they can win some games. But at the end of the day, Christian McCaffrey is such a threat. That's why teams are having to focus so much attention on him. But Arizona is going to run wild. Kyler Murray, I think, has a huge game here. That's the reason I am picking the Cardinals. We have been a little gun shy on them, but I think Arizona gets the job done on the road.
Yeah, Arizona is a good team. Very tough division to play in, but I think that they, again, will get the job done here against just a lesser opponent. Moving into our next game, we look at the matchup here between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Denver Broncos. Broncos got a huge win on Sunday night, pulling a game out. That was an ugly game against the San Francisco 49ers. And the Raiders have yet to pull a game out. They're 0-3 this year, but they are not an 0-3 type of roster. That team is too good to be 0-3, and I see no way, despite playing an AFC West rival here, that they move to 0-4 even on the road. The Raiders, they need to win. If they lose, their season is essentially over, especially since this is a divisional game. They're going to feel the pressure, and they're going to play up to it, and they're going to get the job done. Otherwise, you might as well call this a lost season already. Austin, on the other hand, though, likes the Broncos. He wants to ride with them. Why are you riding with Russell Wilson here?
I definitely think at home, Denver has an advantage. Once again, Mile High is a tough place to play, different level of atmosphere, obviously tougher on the oxygen there. I think that the Denver Broncos are going to have a good game on the ground. Once again, I have a lot of reservations about the Raiders offensive line. Definitely have struggled all year long. I don't expect that to change with the defensive front that Denver has to throw at you, especially, with Bradley Chubb. Definitely a game changer. So that's why I picked Denver here. I think they're going to run the ball, control tempo. And that's why I like Denver at home.
Yeah, if they're going to control the game, it's going to be really important that Nathaniel Hackett's new hire on that coaching staff plays a big role in some of those game management decisions. Moving into our next matchup here, we look at the New England Patriots heading into Green Bay to face the Packers. Mac Jones got roughed up a little bit, 3 interceptions this past week in week 3. And I think it makes it a really clear choice to choose the Packers, who just had a pretty nice team win over the Buccaneers, really didn't give up a lot of yardage in that game. And if Tom Brady and the Buccaneers aren't moving the ball, it's hard to see Mac Jones and the Patriots doing that. I think the Packers, clear, obvious choice. They've really gotten right since that week 1 blowout against Minnesota. Austin, for the Packers here, what are you really watching for?
Yeah, I definitely think that the Packers are going to pick apart New England. New England's defense can hold up, but I have, once again, concerns about New England's offense. Mac Jones very well could be out multiple weeks. High ankle sprain is kind of what they're anticipating. I do struggle picking the Patriots here, especially the Green Bay at home. They're going to get right. Packers, once again, I'm rolling with them.
Yeah, Lambeau Field, very tough place to play. It feels like we've said that about a lot of matchups here, but that's probably one of the toughest places to go into and win, especially when you have a younger QB who, like you said, dealing with an injury right now. We don't even know if he's for sure going to be healthy for that game yet at this point. But the Packers here, probably the easy pick, especially if you're choosing in any type of, betting money sort of league here. You definitely want to ride with the Packers at this point. Moving into our next matchup, we go into Sunday night primetime, and this is one of the best matchups of the week, if not the best matchup. We have the Kansas City Chiefs coming off of a loss against the Indianapolis Colts, going into Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers in what was a Super Bowl rematch from a couple of years ago, and the Buccaneers coming off of a loss. So you have two teams kind of at their low points of the season, both of them 2-1. I'm going with the Buccaneers. I do not bet against Tom Brady, especially not on primetime, especially not at home. It's just, as a Jets fan myself, I've seen it too many times. I'm not picking against him. But Austin, you're the biggest Tom Brady fan I know, and you're still going with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I would love to hear your reasoning and rationale on why Kansas City goes into Tampa and really, probably wins this shootout style game.
It's a revenge game for me. Patrick Mahomes definitely, obviously in the big spotlight, he's always compared to Tom Brady in a lot of different ways, despite their age being so significantly different. But I look at this as being one of those true revenge games. I think Patrick Mahomes is absolutely going to have a huge game, despite Tampa Bay being super, super good defensively. They're very, very stout in the secondary. Their defensive line, they don't give up a ton of rush yards, but I think Kansas City is going to have an explosive game here, despite Tampa's good controlled defense. I think this is the matchup of the week for sure.
I'm very excited for this one. We'll see how Todd Bowles tries to tackle this Chiefs offense. You have a really good coaching matchup here. Andy Reid, the offensive guru, versus Todd Bowles, who's a aggressive defensive play caller, will do a lot of different things, give you exotic looks. And we'll see, how does he limit Travis Kelce? Does Jamel Dean make a play on the outside? What do we really see from these two squads? It'll be a really good matchup. And like you said, I think it's the game of the week, which leads us into our final game of the week here now. And it's Monday Night Football, NFC West, good bloodbath type of game here. The Los Angeles Rams go into San Francisco to take on the 49ers. And Jimmy G struggled this past week. Obviously stepped out of the back of the end zone with the Dan Orlovsky moment. Obviously that's going viral on Twitter right now as we're recording. Definitely a crazy situation that we saw unfold there in Sunday Night Football. But here at this point, Rams, we both went with the Rams. They're just the better team. Cooper Kupp, really dynamic. I don't know if the Niners have an answer for him. Is that kind of what your train of thought is here, Austin?
Cooper Kupp is such a difference maker. I do think it's hard to contain him. San Francisco is a pretty good team overall. They generate good pass rush, more specifically Nick Bosa. But I kind of look at it as there's no answer for him. I think the Rams, once again, they're so disruptive defensively that, they're not going to give Deebo Samuel a ton of chances for sure. They're going to limit those touches. They have a lot of answers for what San Fran has to do offensively. And a big part of it is just Aaron Donald's presence in the middle, not only against the run, but also, defending against the pass. Aaron Donald's a do-it-all kind of guy in the middle and is still playing at an all-pro level.
Right. There's a reason the Rams won a Super Bowl last year. They are loaded with talent, especially star talent. And I think the Rams should just be the favorite here, even though they're going into San Francisco. Still a really good team and a really tough team to beat, regardless of where you're playing. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe for more future content just like this. We also have a lot of fun plans for other NFL style videos here on the channel, maybe some historic deep dives into some old players that are going to maybe give some controversial takes. We're excited about some of that, but hopefully you guys did enjoy. Again, leave a like, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.